We are live and you're all set to begin.
Thank you, Jim. Good afternoon. This is Jason Perot, Chair of the Northborough Groundwater Advisory Committee, and I call to order this February 18th meeting of the Groundwater Advisory Committee. Before we begin, I need to work through some preliminary disclosures relating to remote meeting operation. This open meeting is being conducted remotely consistent with the Governor Baker's executive order of March 12, 2020, due to the current state of emergency in the Commonwealth due to the outbreak of the COVID-19 virus. In order to mitigate the transmission of the COVID-19 virus, we have been advised and directed by the Commonwealth to suspend public gatherings. And as such, the Governor's order suspends the requirement of the open meeting law to have all meetings in a publicly accessible physical location. Further, all members of public bodies are allowed and encouraged to participate remotely. The order, which is posted at the top of our agenda for tonight's meeting, allows public bodies to meet entirely remotely so long as reasonable public access is afforded so that the public can follow along with the deliberations of the meeting. Ensuring public access does not ensure public participation unless such participation is required by law. Except for the scheduled participants for this meeting, there will not be any opportunity for public comment. If you examine the agenda, you will find on there a live stream YouTube link that allows you to connect to the meeting while it's being conducted. The meeting is also being recorded. And just alert the participants in the meeting that the meeting's been recorded. Anything you say or have on display in video will be part of that recording. I recommend at your option, you may wish to mute yourself so that you don't have any intrusive noise coming through to disrupt the meeting. In terms of the ground rules for the meeting, as chair, I will work through the agenda items, invite the presenter to make their presentation, followed by inquiry to the members of the committee for their comments, questions, or motions. Please wait to be recognized by the chair before you speak. Please speak in a manner that will allow us to clearly and easily generate accurate minutes of the meeting. For any response you wish to make, please wait for acknowledgement from the chair to yield to you. I think that pretty much covers everything. Final item is that because this is a remotely conducted meeting, any votes taken in the meeting will be conducted by roll call. So that concludes that portion. Just like now, to go through each of the participants in the meeting to be sure that everyone is properly connected and audible. My name is Jason Perot, Chairman of the Board of Selectmen, Board of Selectmen's rep on the Groundwater Advisory Committee. We have Amy Paretsky, Planning Board Representative.
Yep, I'm here, but also Carrie Martinique was going to join the meeting tonight.
Yes, we're going to bring Carrie in for that agenda item.
Okay, she's on hold right now, so.
Yes, we've been in contact with her. She was going to be essentially working from home on her day job until we're ready to have her address that item.
Okay, so she should just sit on hold. Okay, yeah. Just wanted to let you know.
Yep. We also have Teresa Capobianco, Board of Health Representative.
Present, thank you.
We have Diane Goldner, Conservation Commission Representative.
Present.
And we have Bryant Furman, the Water and Sewer Commissioner Representative.
Present.
We also have Fred Litchfield, Town Engineer.
Present.
And Melanie Rich as our Executive Assistant Support. And thank you, Melanie. And this video is brought to you with the assistance of Jim DiGiulio, who's providing access as our Zoom host for the meeting. With that, I think we can begin if we have the applicant.
Yes, she said she was in the waiting room.
Okay, must be dialing in by phone. Is that correct?
I believe so. I saw her in earlier under Brianna, but then I saw the phone number pop in, so I believe she may have switched.
Okay, I'll bring her in then. Yeah, thank you, Jim. Hello, we have you listed by a phone number. Is this Brianna? Brianna, phone number ending in 739. If you could unmute and acknowledge, please. for the Groundwater Advisory Committee meeting?
I believe *6 will unmute on a phone.
There we go.
Hi there. Thank you. Sorry, I thought the mute button unmuted me.
Okay, just wanted to have you in the meeting before we introduce the agenda item, Brianna.
Perfect. Thank you.
So let me proceed with that. This is to consider the continued petition of Brianna Ritacco for a special permit per Groundwater Protection Overlay District to add a dog kennel at 8 Mill Street, map 57, parcel 54, in the downtown business district and located partially within Groundwater Protection Overlay District areas 2 and 3. So our applicant by phone is Brianna Ritacco. Brianna, am I pronouncing your last name correctly?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. We have had submitted information about the application. We have a map of the location adjoining Mill Street. And we have Fred's letter to this Groundwater Advisory Committee detailing some of the observations for that. I guess first, Brianna, perhaps you could describe what you're proposing here.
Sure. So I had briefly gone over this with the Zoning Board of Appeals last couple weeks ago. So I am proposing that I operate it's the term is a kennel. Technically, the legal terminology is anything over more than 3 dogs that aren't mine that I'm watching for compensation is considered to be a kennel. So I'm asking the town for permission of having 7 dogs that aren't mine in my under my care at one time. I currently own 2 dogs of my own, so it would be a total of proposing a total of 9 on the property. The reason why I had to go before the Zoning Board of Appeals, I am in a downtown business district. However, kennels are not currently allowed in that district, and there's also a bylaw that says you're not allowed to live in the residence that you're doing business with in the downtown business district. And I am also in a partial groundwater 2 and groundwater 3 zone in my yard. So that was why I needed to come before the board here.
Okay, very good. Thank you. Fred, would you like to just walk through your letter here and point out the salient issues?
Sure. I had sent you all a map that I believe was a little bit easier to read. It was one of the attachments in the email that I sent you today, along with the letter, so we can follow along with that. There's nothing really on it. It's just a screenshot from the GIS. But what Mr. Taco is looking for, as she outlined nicely, is what she needs from you is a recommendation on the special permit within the groundwater overlay area. She's also seeking some variances from the ZBA for the home occupation and the kennel within her residential home. Single-family homes are not allowed by right in the downtown business, but hers was existing prior to the bylaw change, the last one, but the other 2 items are variances. The first note just states the site of the groundwater bylaw that she's requiring the special permit from, and then the indication that you need to, or you must or shall, the ZBA can grant the special permit for the expansion of existing non-conforming, which is a residential property, to the extent allowed by the underlying district, provided the special permit granting authority shall not grant approval unless it shall find that such expansion shall not be substantially more detrimental to the water supply. So what we're doing tonight is to make sure that what she's doing isn't more detrimental to the water supply than it would be if she was just a single family home prior to it. Item 2 in my memo talks about the things that are specifically required with any application for a special permit. There are 5 items that are listed. They really don't apply to this particular use, except that in the event that there are some chemicals that she has on site for her business that are beyond what's normally considered household use, should be listed in quantity and volume and what level of hazard they may have. My guess is that there aren't any, which is why she didn't provide them, but I would still like a letter indicating that each of these items is not applicable to her property because she's not having any of those and she's not making any changes to the site. And then we would have that letter in the file for future reference. Item 3 is the fact that there's no site plan. There was some discussion at the planning board meeting and the ZBA meeting that perhaps a site plan would be necessary. Because she's not proposing any changes to the site, she's not required to have any parking spaces, she has no employees. There's nothing to verify on a site plan, so I don't feel that it's appropriate to require her to have an engineered plan when she's not actually proposing anything. That's why the site plan from the GIS seems appropriate to me.
And structurally, it's just the installation of a fence, essentially. That's the
correct. And I believe in the application, she says the 3 sides are already up and the 4th side's coming when the weather permits.
Yeah.
And my concern with the site plan initially was potential conflicts with traffic backing out onto Mill Street. It's a small street, it's a dead end, but still wanted to prevent backing out. And she's provided a letter from her neighbor, who's also her grandmother, indicating that they have a shared driveway and that traffic can flow through from Pierce and Mill Street either direction without backing out. So that kind of eliminates any concern I had about that issue. I do think that that should be formalized or put in writing somehow so that it's in the deed in case the business carries on, but the person who's living in the house is a different person. But that's something that the ZBA could take up. It's not really a groundwater issue. The more problematic one is the last 2, the pet waste, whether it's the feces that in their application said she was going to collect and put out with her weekly trash. And initially, I thought that would be okay, but in terms of verification on that, I called our contact at Wheelabrator, where all of our trash goes here in town, just to verify that quantities of just pet waste would be acceptable, and was told that it would not be. Their initial reaction was, single family house collecting feces once a day wouldn't be an issue, but if it's a concentrated amount on a regular basis, it would be considered sanitary waste, which is not allowed. So they felt as though she should find another way to get rid of it, or get some kind of a permit from Mass DEP indicating that the amount, the volume, and the weight of it on a weekly basis wouldn't, or a monthly basis, whatever it is, wouldn't be a problem. But need to get that in writing. It's as it stands right now, the way I understand the operation of the business, if it happens, is not allowed, and so she would need to find another mechanism to dispose of it. That particular area method is not acceptable. And then the last comment is about the urine. It's a fenced-in area. It's contained that way. The only suggestion I have to make sure that there's no impact to the groundwater is to test the soil before the operation begins, and then test it again afterwards, and then check the pH balance in the soil. If it's increasing to the point where it's noticeable, then a proper amount of lime could be put on the ground periodically to reduce the pH level and bring it back to reduce the acidity of the urine. And it seems a practical approach that could be done, but it should be done continuously after the initial test. That's really all I have for this. It's pretty straightforward application, not a lot of impact, but happy to entertain questions if the committee or the applicant has questions for me based on the letter. She did get it today about the same time you do, so she may have some questions.
Okay. Yeah. First, Brianna, I'll go to you. Based on what you've seen in the letter, do you have any questions for Fred for clarification?
No, I understand it pretty well. I just need to, he suggested I contact Mass DEP Solid Waste, and I'm going to do that, and I'm going to reach out to a couple other like type facilities in the area and see what they do, just to cover all bases to try to see what the best way for me to dispose of the waste is. But I'm on that, so I just don't have an answer for it yet, but I'm going to figure it out.
Okay. And then in terms of the maintenance of the pH level, in terms of just treatments or whatever to keep that in proper balance.
Yeah, that makes sense too. I just don't know how to go about having a soil test done, so I guess I'd have questions on that, and that's really about it. Thank you.
Okay.
If we get to that point, Mr. Taco, if you need a recommendation on a laboratory testing agency, I can give you a couple of recommendations, and it's a simple soil sample. It's not a very, it's not like a septic system where they have to go down 6 or 8 feet to find the soil. You're just testing the soil at the surface. They run it through a lab and they tell you if the pH is high or low, and then approximately how much lime would be necessary to balance it out. It's fairly straightforward, but it's something that you should monitor to see if it's necessary every 6 months or annually, just to keep it neutral.
Thank you. That answers that. Thank you.
Okay. I'll go to the members of the board now. Diane, if you have a question, I can't see you, so you'll have to speak up.
Okay, I do have a question. First of all, I don't recall seeing how large the yard is. And if I remember correctly, the letter said 7 dogs and it's 9. Is that compatible, or will it be compatible with that many animals?
Was that question for me?
Yes.
Okay, thanks. I'm sorry. So my yard is about 6,000 to 6,500 square feet, roughly. I did a rough measurement, so it's probably actually larger than that, but on the minimum, that's how big it is. The 7, I own the 2 of the dogs, which is why it's 9. I'm only asking for 7 because the definition of a kennel is taking care of 3 or more dogs that aren't the owners. So that is why I only asked for that. And I also did want to mention that at the ZBA meeting, I had the town clerk look up how many dogs are allowed on a property in Northborough, and there isn't a set limit. So I could technically own as many as I wanted.
Interesting. Thank you.
Can I just jump in and ask a follow-up question on that? Jason, if
Yes,
you don't
go
mind?
ahead, Fred. Yep.
Brianna, the lot size you have is about 0.07 acres or 11,000 square feet or so, but how much of the lot is the fenced-in area? Is that the 6,000 that you were referring to, or did you think the whole lot was 6,000?
No, that's the fenced-in area is the 6,000. So it's the whole, it's everything but where the house is, the front yard and the driveway. So the whole back and side of the house is fenced.
Okay, so it's about half the lot, a little more. Well, about
Correct,
half.
yes.
Okay, and that makes sense with 6,000.
Yep. Any questions by other board members? Amy?
Yeah, it was driveway, part of the front yard in the background that is backyard that's groundwater 2. Would it be safer for the groundwater, Fred, to keep the fenced in area on the groundwater 3, as it's not, not as dangerous for the groundwater? It looks like a major portion of the yard is a groundwater 3. So I was just trying to keep it off the groundwater 2.
There's really not much of a distinction in terms of how it could be protected differently in groundwater 3 than groundwater 2. And the section of the bylaw that she's applying for a special permit just says that you need to make sure that it's not more detrimental than the existing use. So my opinion is, as long as she monitors the soil and properly disposes of the pet waste, it doesn't need to be restricted to just the area 3, but that is something the board can make a recommendation on if you choose to.
Okay. And another thing that we've talked about in the past with other dog owners or dog not kennels, but they're overnight boarding of 3 dogs. And we talked about it. Another one is maybe a condition that all the pet waste needs to be picked up at the end of the day and put in a special container. So, so it will keep it off the groundwater. I looked up some DEP health model guidelines for the groundwater, and I can read the draft groundwater bylaw, and it says that it's prohibited they call it animal manure, but it doesn't say it's just for horses, needs to be either prohibited or stored in a proper container at the end of each day. So I thought that might be, if this is a business, could be a condition that at the end of the day, that the animal waste is picked up and put into a proper storage container until it's picked up by the service that comes to pick it up.
If I believe that's what was in the application that she said she was going to be doing, was picking it up all daily,
Yeah.
and storing it until she put her trash out weekly. But I didn't see the need to restate that because that was what she was indicating that was her process would be.
I just know from being on the board that if you don't make it a condition, as soon as the decision's written, if it's not a condition, we've been said, well, you talked about it, but you didn't make it a condition, so they don't have to follow it. So I just wanted to know if that's what she was planning on doing. Maybe she wouldn't mind making it an actual condition on the decision.
I'll let her answer that.
No, I don't mind that at all. I actually do it multiple times a day currently and put it in the container. So I could definitely guarantee I would do it once a day. I don't like leaving it lying around for multiple reasons. So the sooner the better.
All right, thank you.
Any other questions, Amy?
Nope, that's all I had.
And board members, Teresa or Bryant, any questions?
No, none from me. Thank you.
No, thank you. My questions have been answered already. Thank you.
Okay. Diane, do you have any additional questions?
No, I don't.
Okay. So from this discussion, we have the considerations that Fred has outlined in terms of consultation with DEP, soil test. Let me just refer back to the, there were the conditions. There are other portions of the bylaw enumerating items, and Fred, you had mentioned you just want to see a written statement to say they're not applicable, or in what way they're applicable, if they are,
Yeah.
right?
I was looking for confirmation that there are no chemicals that are toxic or hazardous that are stored or used on site that are above normal household use. Just something for the file, unless there is something that she omitted because she just didn't think of it. But
Yeah.
my guess is that there isn't anything. I don't know of anything, but I don't own a kennel, so I don't know.
Okay.
No, that's I don't use any out of the ordinary cleaning products or have a substantial amount of them or anything, but I'd be happy to write that in a letter for you.
It would be helpful if you were to maybe sketch on that plan that I sent you where the fenced area would be. Actually, if you call me, I can send you another map with the actual groundwater line so that we can, show where it changes from 3 to 2 or 2 to 3. And you can show where the fence is proposed around that. I understand verbally the way you described it, but it'd be nice to see it on a plan. That way we can do a physical check later on to make sure it's in the right place.
Sure, no problem. Thank you.
And then the only other thing that we should talk about is whether or not, and it's really not a groundwater issue, is that the easement that's granted from the neighbor to allow traffic to pass through be memorialized somehow. It's really more of a determination for the ZBA if they want to require that, but you want to weigh in on that, I'll be happily put it in the letter.
Thank you. Yeah, no, I have no problem putting that in the letter as well.
It may actually be on the deed already. I didn't do the research of the deed that was submitted, just referenced some previous ones. And so it may be on there somewhere. Your letter from your grandmother indicates that it's a shared driveway and that she has no problem with it going back and forth. So it seems easy enough for future reference to
Okay.
have it recorded.
Perfect. Thank you.
Great. If there are no other questions, then do I have a motion? I'm sorry, I can't hear you, Amy.
Would anybody be interested in adding the condition about the storage waste pickup every day? Put in a container?
I'd be happy to include that as an explicit condition. I think that was what the applicant intends to do anyway, but I'm fine to put it in as a.
I have
As
it
a
in my
condition.
notes to add it to the letter.
Okay, okay.
Yep.
And I just tried to open up your letter and I couldn't. It said there's an error when I went to open it. So is there a note with the soil tests on how many times, like once a year? Is that specified in the memo?
The memo, I'll read it to you. It says, while pet urine is not an easy item to collect or control, I'd recommend a soil analysis within the fenced-in area prior to the start of the kennel operation, and again 6 months after. Should the pH level in the soil samples show an increase, then an appropriate amount of lime should be applied to the entire site fenced-in area to neutralize the increase in acidity. This program of soil sampling and lime application should continue as long as the kennel is in operation. And if you want, we can add to that, be done annually or biannually, or whatever the committee feels is appropriate. I think at least the first time should be done within 6 months, depending on how acidic it is. There'd be a need to either do it every 6 months. My guess is that annually would probably be sufficient, simply because then she could target the summer months where it's a little easier to dig a small hole. So I guess my recommendation would be annually after that.
Okay, and is that part of an operations and maintenance report? Like, does it get sent to you? Does it get sent to the Board of Health?
I would have, it wouldn't go to the Board of Health, as they really wouldn't have much to do with it. But I would ask that the soil sample and the recommended amount of lime to be submitted in a report annually after the 6 months, and then annually after that to me, and I would have it in my file. And then,
Okay.
and then a confirmation that the application was actually done. So whether it's a receipt from landscaper or somebody who actually applies the amount of lime, or if she does it, she just verifies with a receipt of where she bought the lime and when she put it down. Something that confirms that it was actually done, not just recommended.
Okay, so you can add that to your memo.
Yep.
And does the committee think it annually? I know he said 6 months or annually. I'm okay with annually after the first
I
6
think
months.
annual for the scale of what's going on here, it seems to me that annually is sufficient. Again, after the first phase of a 6 month interval.
Yep.
And annually thereafter. Yeah. I'm sorry, I was going to invite a motion for the purpose of deliberation and discussion and imposition
Oh.
of conditions, but either way is fine. Yeah.
Jason, if you'd like a motion, I'll make that motion.
Okay.
Perfect. So
Motion.
motion to
Motion to recommend approval.
right, recommend approval of the application under the Groundwater Advisory Committee bylaws, subject to the conditions that we've set forth already at this meeting.
Okay. Any other concerns or conditions that board members feel would be appropriate? Hearing none. Do I have a second for that motion?
Second.
Seconded. Okay. Motion by Teresa Capobianco, second by Diane Goldner. Conditions are expressed. If there's no further discussion, this is a roll call vote. Diane Goldner,
Yes.
Bryant Furman,
Aye.
Teresa Capobianco,
Aye.
Amy Paretsky,
Aye.
and I, Jason Perot, also vote aye. So the motion carries unanimously to recommend approval with conditions. I think, Fred, you'll follow up with the applicant.
I will. I will draft a
Okay.
letter and send it to the ZBA along with a copy to the applicant.
Very good.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you everyone
Brianna?
for your time.
You're welcome. And I've moved Brianna out to the waiting room. If there's no objection by the, I have to fix my view here. If there's no objection by the committee members, I'd like to move to the last item on the agenda before old new business, which is informal discussion of the planning board's proposed groundwater bylaw amendments regarding special permit criteria in a groundwater area. Let me, I don't know if Carrie's listening or not, but I'm just going to pop her into the meeting here. Hello, Carrie. If you could unmute and just acknowledge.
Hello.
Hi, how you doing?
Good. Hold on here. Let me get situated. Hello. Thanks for having
Okay.
me.
So we're doing the agenda item, informal discussion of planning board's proposed groundwater bylaw amendments regarding special permit criteria in a groundwater area. Just to preface it, the planning board has had discussions about bylaw revisions they would like to bring forward at our next town meeting. One of those concerns the bylaw regarding special permit in the groundwater area. Had initially expected that our planning board member on this committee, Amy Paretsky, would be able to speak to it. It's just kind of an informational thing, but Amy and Carrie, who is the planning board chair, preferred that Carrie appear here to make that presentation. As I understand it, Carrie, you're actually in a sense, the primary author of the bylaw and
Yeah.
probably best positioned to speak to it. And so thank you for being here to make this presentation. I will just turn the meeting over to you. I don't know if you have the text prepared to share, if that's convenient for you.
Sure, I can do that. Did everybody already receive a copy or no?
I
Fred-
sent them, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I was going to say, Fred, if you could speak to that, because I thought there was some confusion about which text was the most recent or most correct version.
I believe I sent the most recent version. What I forwarded to the committee was what you had sent to Kathy after the planning board meeting, the most recent one. So that's the one that I sent, although
Okay.
I do acknowledge that you did send me an email back in January with the bylaw amendments and wanted me to share it with them at that time. We hadn't met since then, and so it never got to them. And I noticed that today when I was looking at it, the version that came to me from after the last planning board meeting was slightly different than the version that we had back in January. So this is the one I sent. If that's not the right one, I apologize.
All right, we'll find out.
Okay.
Okay. So, I can't screen share, I guess. If you can enable screen sharing.
Is that something Jim does or?
It says host disabled attendee screen sharing.
I don't.
So the options that it's set on says one participant can share at a time, but what I can do is make you co-host for the moment. And I believe making you co-host will allow you to screen share if that's all right with the chair.
That's fine. Yeah. I think Carrie has maneuvered around Zoom in the past capably.
So Carrie, actually, I think I can make two co-hosts. So Carrie, you're a co-host, and Jason, I believe you are also still a co-host.
All right, great.
Yes, yeah.
I'm going to share my screen with everybody then. We'll get started. I don't want to take up too much time. Can everybody see the bylaw here?
Mhm.
Yes.
Okay, great. So this right here is what the planning board has settled on in terms of putting a bylaw forward here. What we wanted to do, and Fred mentioned already, is get feedback from Groundwater. So that's something that you can discuss. You don't have to provide it to me necessarily on the fly. If you want to just have me talk about it, and then you can, if you don't have any questions, you're welcome to discuss and debate and come back with feedback. That's okay too. But to whatever extent I can answer your questions, I'm happy to do so. Essentially,
Carrie, can you just kind of, to start with anyway, just kind of give us the high level, what the concern is that motivates a change and how the change is an improvement, I guess.
Sure. So in this case, what's motivating a change is that the way that our bylaws read creates a little bit of ambiguity in terms of how an applicant would go about getting a special permit. And it's created a perception that there are two different ways to get a groundwater special permit. So we debated about it quite a bit and went back and forth and tried to figure out how do we make all the pieces work, because there are a lot of different underlying components. And we want to make it so that it's as seamless as possible, and also just makes it very clear that there's one way to get a groundwater special permit. So that was the genesis of embarking on this journey, and why it's changed a few different times since the version you're seeing here. But basically, there are two different pieces here. One is just making it all synced in with one way to get a special permit. And the second piece is really just moving some text that was, you notice right up top here, it was just stuffed in with some information about how to file with the town clerk, but then it was a little bit more about criteria. So it was moving that content into the area that speaks specifically to criteria. So two major components, tying it in with the special permit criteria, the general special permit criteria, and then moving that content that was more criteria focused into the criteria section. So that was the genesis of that. I don't know if anybody has any questions, or I'm not sure, does everybody have a copy of the bylaws, or you can access them online as well if you want to follow along. I can't open my full, let me see if I can make this.
I believe this is the version that I sent to everyone, Carrie, so that
Okay. I hate
think
to make
they
it
have.
so small, but in full, this is it in full.
Yep.
And I'm just gonna, I hope everyone can still see it. Is that too small?
That's fine.
Okay.
No, that's fine. Yeah.
So I'm happy to take questions through the chair, or
Sure.
share additional questions.
I'll start. I guess part of my understanding of the inconsistency among the several bylaws was that some of them refer back to the general special permit criteria, but the groundwater one did not. Is that correct?
That's right. Yep. So you'll notice if you go through all of our overlay districts, there is a tie back to the general special permit criteria. For this particular one, their same language wasn't replicated. And in some of our discussions, we went back and forth of, well, does that even make sense? Because traffic, maybe traffic doesn't belong on a groundwater special permit criteria. So that just doesn't make sense. However, what we ended up talking about was, well, if something really doesn't make sense criteria-wise, then in our findings, when we write our decision, we just write not applicable. But even the floodplain overlay district tied back to this, and that would have a similar circumstance of you'd kind of, ask, does that criteria actually work, item per item? But I think, and I don't know if Amy would agree, that in many cases, all the criteria doesn't always apply to every single application, no matter what. So that was something there. And then there was what I tried to do was figure out, when did this change? So I went back to 2009 and I asked Andy for a copy of the bylaws even before that, so I could follow the trail. And there just wasn't a good trail for me to follow. But one of the board members who's been on actually at the time of the 2009 bylaw changes had commented that, it could have just been something as part of those 2009 changes, not hooking up that last piece. Sometimes when you have major bylaw overhaul changes like that, you hope that you caught everything, but sometimes you don't. So this, in my view, is cleaning that up a little bit.
Okay, thank you. I guess that was, partly What I was trying to understand was whether or not that difference was essentially clerical omission in some sense at some transition, or whether that difference was deliberate because there was something about the groundwater district or something that needed to be treated separately from
Yeah,
the-
I know.
the
I
general
did try to
criteria.
crack that and follow the trail. It's so hard because we had that major bylaw overhaul, so it was all combined in one big packet. The change came all at once, so it's difficult to say, okay,
Right.
let's follow this article, which is too bad because that would have been helpful for sure.
But in your opinion, that you don't find any history or anything to suggest that the current construction was deliberate in not making the reference to the general permit criteria.
I mean, I don't see why it would, because then you would create two different ways to get a special permit, where it actually creates a lot of, liability is a strong word to use, but to some extent it does create some liability, because if you have people thinking there are different ways to get a special permit and you have one applicant do it one way and another applicant do it the other way, then you start to get the question of, well, why is my level of scrutiny different than your level of scrutiny if we have a similar application? And that does start to create some level of inequity, and it makes it difficult for the board to sort through, and it takes up a lot of time and energy and resources to unravel it each time.
Got it.
Doesn't make sense that the floodplain bylaw would point back, but not the groundwater
Well,
It's really
and all the others.
actually,
Just to coordinate here a little bit. Yes, Fred,
sorry.
please proceed.
I didn't mean to jump in. I'm sorry.
No, I just, because we're trying to do this through a remote meeting, just please wait to be recognized.
Okay.
Fred, go ahead.
I wanted to point out that it's my understanding that this was not in the initial bylaw when it was adopted back in 1986. And I think it was purposely omitted, and they set the criteria at the time with those three items that are shown below that last underlined section, that underlined section just above, and that they were trying to make the special permit for a groundwater area relative to the actual protection of the groundwater and not involve the other items, because there are several other areas in that 703040 section that's being added that are, as Carrie indicated, traffic and other things, and including there's a number of things. I believe that the bylaw is fine the way it is. I think that Carrie's suggestion to move that portion that's stricken up above and put it down below and take it out of the part that goes to the town clerk does make a lot of sense. I think that the criteria for the groundwater special permit is appropriate laid out in those items 1, 2, and 3, and that it isn't confusing, and that it should be left, that part should be left out, and that it's quite clear the way it is, and that I think it's more confusing if it ends up being using the same criteria that's applied to a site plan special permit, which is not what the groundwater special permit was intended for. So those are my 2 cents, really.
Okay, thank you. Teresa?
Thank you, Jason. Fred, I don't know if you can answer this question, or if maybe we have to ask Ms. Juber or Mr. Federico. Is there the possibility that an applicant can require a special permit under groundwater, but not otherwise need a special permit for whatever it is they're trying to do under the general bylaw?
I can answer that. Not sure how many scenarios could create that, but the one that you just heard tonight was one. The 8 Mill Street special permit, because it was a expansion of a non-conforming use, but there were no other special permits required. There are variances because she's wants to operate a kennel and a home occupation, but there's no other special permit. So I believe that answers your question.
Okay, so it is possible that somebody like our applicant who is before us tonight, if this bylaw were changed, would have to go through the whole general special permit process.
That's correct.
Just to get the groundwater.
I believe so, yes.
All right, then I agree with Fred. I agree with your assessment that the second part, the deletion and movement of that one sentence down to subparagraph E makes sense, but merging this into the general bylaw does not.
Uh,
I have a comment. If you,
Yes, just a second, please.
sorry, I just don't know if you can see me or not. That's why.
Well, the problem is with the sharing, let me ask you this. Is there any need by anybody to continue to view the shared document?
Oh, sorry, am I making things difficult?
No, well, no. What's happening is I have a ribbon of video here, and I can't see all the board members at the same time to see whether anyone's indicating whether they want to speak or not. If there's no need for anyone to further see the document, then we can stop sharing and I can recover
Sure.
my
Yep.
full gallery view here. Thank you, Carrie. Go ahead, Amy.
Yes, on the application tonight, if you look at the interpretation sheet that Bob Federico did, it calls for a special permit site plan approval, which points to the special permit criteria anyway. So the application in front of us tonight, unless she resubmits it, is going to have to go through the general permit criteria. And we've been told by town council that any special permit, whether it's a groundwater special permit or any other type of special permit that has a site plan, goes through special permit site plan approval, which goes down 7.03-040. So it's the same criteria. This just makes it more black and white, like Carrie said, so people don't try to go it 2 different ways, but in reality, they can't anyways.
Okay, just as I look back at the prior applicant submission here,
Under
are you referring to, what is
his
the 5th page?
interpretation sheet on the application, where Bob Federico wrote home occupation, kennel, special permit site plan approval.
Okay, on the following page that has applications for hearing, there are checkboxes for special permit and special permit groundwater protection, but special permit for site plan approval is not checked.
Oh, it was on his interpretation sheet, is what I looked through. Under Bob Federico's, it might be further down in the application.
No, I see Bob's interpretation request form, signed by Bob Federico.
And there isn't a special permit site plan approval?
Well, sorry, Jason.
Yes, please,
help out a
if
bit.
you have some clarity here.
If you
Fred.
look at the zoning interpretation that's dated December 8th, 2020, you look on the left-hand side, there's 4 arrows. The bottom one points to required ZBA special permit / special permit with site plan approval. And then it lists 703-050A2, which is not, which I don't believe is the one that triggers the special permit under 703-040.
I don't have it in front of me, but I know 7 special permit site plan approval does trigger 703-040.
Right. What I'm pointing out here is that there seems to be an inconsistency between that zoning interpretation form and the following page, application for hearing with checkboxes, which indicates special permit and special permit for groundwater protection, but does not check the special permit with site plan approval box. So I'm unclear about the circumstances of this particular application as an example for what we're discussing here.
I can appreciate the confusion. I had a lengthy discussion with Bob to clarify the need for a site plan, because that was something that came up the other night at the planning board meeting. There was a little discussion, and we determined that a site plan was not necessary. So I'm guessing that when she actually applied, she did not apply for the site plan special permit because it wasn't necessary. But I'd have to refer to Bob and find out if he feels as though she didn't complete the application in accordance with his direction.
So, Mr. Chair,
Yes, Teresa.
I think my point of my comment on this bylaw amendment was that if there's any possibility that there's an applicant who would only be applying for the special permit under the groundwater and not need to apply for special permit under the general bylaw, then there is a need to keep the bylaw as written for those particular applicants. Whether they have to follow other procedures or not, this is what's in place for those particular applicants, and this is what should remain in place for those applicants.
Sorry,
that.
Diane, I can't see you. I can't tell if you have any comment you'd like to make or not.
No, not at this time.
Okay. Carrie, did you want to respond?
Sure. Well, I just want to make sure everyone had a chance to, I think that these are great valid points and a good discussion. I just want to clarify a little bit about the special permit with site plan approval. What's happening is that whenever there is a special permit, a site plan with special permit, it turns into the special permit, site plan with special permit approval, and that kicks off 703040. So that's what's creating two different ways to get a special permit. So what we really try to debate is one of these has to be disbanded because there can't be two ways. And the problem with just making the groundwater one is that the groundwater is an advisory committee. It's not an SPGA. So you can't carve out a special little spot for groundwater to have their own little special permit. It really makes the general special permit criteria superfluous and it nullifies it, which really isn't how the bylaw should be read. So rather than carve out a separate, just because you need separate or distinct decisional criteria, it shouldn't nullify our general special permit criteria. That's part of the law. That's part of what the SPGA looks at. That's not really the groundwater's role to serve as a proxy SPGA. So when we talked about, all right, one of these things has to unravel, we'd really have to go back and unravel that site plan of special permit approval. And then the second problem to that is we went back and looked at all of our decisions, our planning board decisions since 2005. And whenever we have a site plan with special permit approval with the groundwater, of course, we were doing both sets. So we really struggled with, well, if we have to do something, we have to come down to one way to do it. So how do we best do that without, blowing up our entire process? And because the other overlay districts had a similar way that it connected that, it seemed to be the easiest or the path that made the most sense based on historical decisions and based on the authority when you start to look at SPGA authority. I hope that clarifies a little bit.
Okay, thank you. Speaking for myself, I don't think I have enough full understanding of the subtleties, the permit application and evaluation and permit process to choose a direction on this. And it's not really necessary to choose a direction at this point. This is more informational for us to understand what's being proposed for the change. Are there any other questions or clarifications that board members would like?
Can I ask one last question?
Yes, Diane.
I was noticing that they're asking for like 9 copies of whatever it is that's going to come with these applications. Seems like a lot, especially when almost everybody else is doing it electronically, that people should be able to just print it off and use it that way. And whatever copies the town needs, they can do that way also.
Is that, that's a general comment about our process and the requirement for paper copies?
For this particular item. I don't know how many copies other boards and
I see. Fred, can you speak to
ask
that?
for.
I think what Diane's referring to is that she went back into the bylaw and looked at that section 703040. And like I said, there's a number of things in there that talks about the submission, the criteria, the dates, the deadlines, and things like that. And a lot of that information is I don't believe is necessary to put it directly into the groundwater portion of the bylaw. I think Carrie's correct in that I don't believe that the groundwater is superfluous and needs to be taken away. I think that needs to be acknowledged that there are 2 special permits that need to be issued. One under the groundwater portion of the bylaw with the criteria that's outlined in the groundwater section of the bylaw. And then there may, in other cases, also be a special permit with site plan approval with criteria that's outlined in that 703040. I don't know that they all of what's in 703040, 703040 needs to be in the groundwater special permit. I think the groundwater special permit criteria, those 3 items, really address what's the impact to the groundwater supply. And the way the groundwater committee has always operated was they're not the ones, as Carrie indicated is appropriate, that they're not the ones issuing the special permit. They're reviewing the proposed use to determine if there's a way to mitigate potential risks and hazards to the groundwater. And if the things are done, as we've talked about with containment and proper drainage and things in accordance with state regulations as far as the drainage goes, and then mitigating any potential spills or hazards that could occur during the operation of the site, if those are properly handled to the committee's satisfaction, then they would recommend approval with specific guidelines to this SPGA, and then they would make the determination that those conditions are appropriate and grant in accordance with those 3 criteria, the groundwater special permit, and then other issues like traffic and other issues beyond groundwater concerns would be in that special permit granted for site plan special permit or special permit site plan approval. And I realize it's a little convoluted, but I think that it's appropriate to kind of leave it the way it is and not add that section. But again, it's not something I want to die on the hill over either.
I know, I've said the same. Just if you don't mind, through the chair.
Very good. Any other comments, board members?
One comment, Chairman.
Sure, Brian. Yep.
This has been going on for many, many years, and I was unaware of any confusion or concerns about applicants. They seem to know what the process was. Even individuals, not consultants. The consultants understand it, and it was more of a process to make them aware of any concerns that Conservation Commission or Board of Health or Water and Sewer might have, to make sure that they have addressed everything or knew what they had to address before going to the ZBA. And I'm confused as to how there's a perception that there's some confusion or interpretation problem. I'm unaware of that occurring with the applicants. So that's my only concern. If it ain't fixed, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. You know.
Thank you, Brian. Sure, Carrie.
It actually does create some confusion, and a lot of times the applicants will come to us and they'll think that they've actually gotten approval for groundwater. This criteria, the main 3 criteria, isn't going away. One thing I think we learned at the board meeting that Amy expressed is most of the committee members didn't even have a copy of the bylaws. So how is criteria for a groundwater special permit being evaluated by the committee if you didn't even have the bylaws?
I think that's going to be a topic for our next agenda
Oh, okay.
item, which the board will talk about, and I would not assume that comment was fully accurate.
Okay, well, that's fine. But in any case, it's causing, what it's doing is that applicants are then either not picking a path that suits the purpose, or they're coming and they're thinking that they actually have approval. And a lot of times we'll get, our groundwater permit's been approved by the groundwater advisory committee or the groundwater board. And really it's an advisory committee, and it's not, it's putting up different perception in their heads. They have an approval that they don't, in that the criteria has been met, which it may have, but we're not getting this information, which it sounds like you're going to talk about later, that actually goes down that criteria. Criteria is not going away. It's just helping the board to make one path to a special permit, and it's not really possible to unravel the other path. So we have to fix one of these paths one way or the other. It's just too much of a liability. So I hope that helps explain. And certainly, like, you can have feedback that you don't like this, and that's fine too. I mean, your feedback's welcome, whether you like it or you will have some comments that you don't like it. That's okay. So I'm not here to browbeat it, just to explain the best I can.
Yes, thank you. We appreciate the explanation. And as I said, for myself, I probably need to understand better the details of the permit processes and to understand the distinction and what makes more sense to me. And as you say, it's at most just feedback or input or recommendation from this committee. Because I'm forgetting, at some point, the planning board will be holding a public hearing on proposed bylaw revisions for town meeting.
Yes, timeline to be determined. Hopefully,
Okay, yep.
the next few meetings. Yep.
So if there's any feedback that individuals wish to make, that would be an opportunity as well to convey any.
Yeah,
concerns.
absolutely. And I don't know if what we have is perfect. I mean, we're just trying to fix it the best we can with what we have to work with. And if there are things we need to, if it's an iterative process, then, maybe that's what it is. So any feedback is appreciated.
Okay, very good. If there's no other questions or comments by the committee, and hearing none.
Okay.
All right. Thank you very much, Carrie. Appreciate it.
Okay. Thank you, everybody. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Okay, let me, sorry.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, Brian.
Right, I didn't want to bring it up during the discussion with the applicant, but in Fred's memo on the conditions for the soil testing,
Yes.
in item number 6, it said, should the pH level of soil samples show an increase, it should be a decrease. The concern is the acidity of the soil. The pH will go down, it won't go up. If it goes up, then there's no problem. The other comment I wanted to make was that pet urine is usually in the range of 5 to 7 to begin with. The pH of Coca-Cola is 2.5. So I'm not sure. I think this might be an overkill, that's all.
I see, yeah.
But that
We've disposed
condition
of,
number 6.
right, we've disposed of the, but yes, if that's just essentially a technical correction to get the pH
Right,
moving in the
yeah,
right direction, then yes, certainly we'll make that correction.
I
Who
don't
knew
think
up was
I don't
down?
think it needs another vote.
Up is down.
Who
By
knew up was
agreement,
down?
the committee will ask Fred to apply the correction as identified by Bryant. Thank you
I
very
will,
much.
and appreciate
Thank
the
you.
clarification.
I'd have to go pretty far
Thumbs
back in
up, there's
my
no reason for the line.
chemistry education to remember which direction is. Anyway, okay, next item. Informal discussion regarding groundwater application review and recommendation process pursuant to planning board members' comments during planning board meetings of January 19th and February 2nd. So let me please preface this discussion. And being mindful, it's currently 17:35. That's 5:35 p.m. and we have a hard stop at 6:30 p.m. For the next meeting to pass on the Zoom license. In my capacity as Board of Selectmen liaison to the planning board, I typically view the meetings that take place as they're being conducted through the YouTube live stream. On the occasions of January 19 and February 2nd, the board was discussing its proposed bylaw revisions, including the bylaw we were just discussing, the change to the groundwater. In the course of that discussion, our member Amy Paretsky had some incidental comments relating to the process of the Groundwater Advisory Committee's review, the scope of the review, what's considered, what's not considered. I collected a couple of the URLs that I sent to you all in email so that you could view them. And I guess I would just like to have a discussion about the understanding of what is in the scope of this committee, what we focus on in our evaluation and what we convey in our recommendations, and whether to some extent there's any additional clarity required in our communications to the other boards to be clear about what aspects we consider in making our recommendation and what aspects of the bylaw we defer to the judgment of the special permit granting authority. Having said that, as I viewed these segments of the meeting, I also had the personal feeling that the expertise or informedness of the committee members was described in a way that might undermine the public confidence. I was very concerned about that aspect of it, and essentially, characterizations made from those comments, potentially relating to the committee as a whole or to an individual board member, that may not have been a entirely accurate representation to make. So I wanted to have that discussion here to allow the board members to weigh in to whatever extent they'd like to, and to consider what the past practice of this committee has been in formulating its recommendations, and whether any changes are required or whether any improvements need to be made in the phrasing of our recommendations to provide a clearer scope of assessment to the permit granting authorities that we present those recommendations to. Yes, Amy, would you like to speak on this?
Sure. I just want to speak to a little of it. And just to say that, I'm not meaning to offend anyone. I'm trying to say that I'm not an expert. And I don't know if anyone had time to watch the last 6 months of meetings. Our meetings are 4 to 5 hours long, but there have been many cases where the applicant or the lawyers will turn around and say, well, if say our board, someone on our board has read the groundwater and the stormwater operations and management packet, and we have a question, being the special permit granting authority, it's been turned around and said, well, the experts have already approved that. So, how could you question it when the experts didn't? And tried to turn that around on us at the Groundwater Committee Advisory are experts in the field. And I'm not saying that maybe Bryant is or Diane, but I know that I graduated in finance, was in computer science. And I think, I'm not saying anything bad about you, Jason. I said, you're probably software, and Teresa's a real estate attorney. And I guess the view of certain boards and certain applicants that our committee is a group of experts is a little over exaggerated and used against the special permit granting authorities' right to ask questions also, because they say that the Groundwater Committee unanimously approved it. And what right do you have to question their authority? We've gotten that a couple times. And I look back on what we did last year we decided as a committee not even to receive the stormwater reports, and we don't even read them. So for them to say that someone on the planning board can't have a question because the Groundwater Committee already approved it and they're the experts, it really undermined the special permit granting authority. So I was trying to say that although everybody here, I think, are really amazing volunteers, and Fred's groundwater engineering expertise is amazing, to say that we read all the reports and unanimously agreed with them, and now that the special permit granting authority, whether it's the ZBA or the planning board, shouldn't be allowed to question it, it seemed like they were using the Groundwater Committee to tie the hands of the special permit granting authority boards. They were saying, how can you question that when the experts have already unanimously approved it? And that's when I was trying to say that, I'm on the board and everybody's great. And some people probably do have expertise, but I know I don't. And others, I don't think your fields are also in the groundwater expertise. That's all I was trying to say. I wasn't trying to offend anyone.
So
And-
just for clarification, for someone who's watching this, the Groundwater Advisory Committee is comprised of individuals from other town boards and committees. So that
Yep.
includes member of the Planning Board, member of the Board of Health, member of the Conservation Commission, member of the Water and Sewer Commissioners, and a member of the Board of Selectmen, who undoubtedly is the least expert at this stuff compared to the other members, at least with respect to the responsibilities of their respective boards. So it's the case that the membership on this committee isn't specifically due to any particular qualifications or professional qualifications, I should say. And the committee is by charter. The appointees come from those respective boards, whoever those boards designate to this committee. And the committee relies very heavily on the professional expertise of town staff to review a lot of the information and to verify a lot of the information. And that's the basis for this committee's evaluation to a great extent. There are occasions when we look through some of the reports and identify a number here or there that doesn't look right. More often, that's probably Fred than one of the committee members. And in many cases, we may be faced with circumstances where an initial submission of some of the impervious coverage numbers or something isn't quite right, and we require a follow-up to make some corrections or to get the drainage calculations correct, things to that extent. In those cases, most typically, it is going to be the professional town staff who's rechecking and verifying that information in support of this committee. And I don't see, for example, that this committee is going to engage an independent consultant to come in and provide an independent view of that kind of information. So I think it's within the capabilities of several members on this committee to grasp the information, to give it a critical eye to some extent, and to ask relevant questions to try to gauge the quality of the information. So to that point, I ask the other members of the board if they have any comments to make on that point. Teresa?
Thank you, Jason. I was on this board as on this committee as the planning board liaison. And then when I moved over to Board of Health, I rejoined this board because I really enjoy the work this board does. I can't speak for the other members of this board, but I've always had a copy of the bylaws. And just so that Amy is clear that we don't just show up and rely on other people to do our jobs for us, which is unfortunately the message that I believe was conveyed in your comments twice. When I receive an application, I take my bylaws, I take the application, and even though I know those bylaws now, I will review one in light of the other and make my list of questions. For whatever reason, most of my questions get answered before I have to make a comment or question to the board. Fred does a really good job at sort of figuring all this out in advance. His commentary letters really do address most of my concerns as a Board of Health member. So I think to characterize any of us, as you did in that meeting, was inappropriate. And speaking for myself, and I can really only speak for myself, it's offensive, but I understand that you maybe are saying that because you feel that way about your position on this board, on this committee. I think that the message needs to be conveyed clearer though next time, if that's what you're really trying to say. Because I think Ethan's right in that you did put a message out there to everybody in this town that the board lacks the capacity to do its job. And I don't think that that's the case.
Thank you, Teresa. Diane or Brian, do you have any comment?
I don't.
Thank you, Diane. Brian?
I just want to reiterate that no one's knows everything, and that's why the board has the makeup it does, so that issues can be addressed when there's somebody on the board that has the expertise, so we all defer to Fred, who deals with it day in and day out. So I think the members are all knowledgeable, and I have a copy of the regulations and the bylaws also. And everyone, when I joined, I was given one and boned up on it, and we proceeded forward. It's not rocket science, and there's good comments, and there's enough knowledge between conservation and Board of Health and water and sewer and Title V and hazardous waste. So I'm proud to be on this board. I think we do a good job, and as an advisory committee, I don't think any lawyer would come in and argue, well, the experts said, when they know it's an advisory board and not a definitive professional review that is written in stone. So I think it's a good process, and hope it doesn't change too significantly. Thank you.
Thank you, Brian. Yes, Amy?
Yeah, I just want to say I'm sorry if I offended anyone. I didn't mean to downgrade anyone. And I actually think everybody does a great job, but maybe it's the process of the way we write our memos. When we write our memos saying that we unanimously approve of the application, that is used to undermine any discussion by the special permit granting authority. And that's the only reason why I brought up the expert, is because that was used against us. And it was also used in a ZBA meeting. Someone had a question, and it had to do with zoning. It didn't even have to do with, it was the zoning on the groundwater. And they said, well, the Groundwater Advisory Committee unanimously approved it. You know, we can't question it. We have to take their expert advice. And it's happened on 2 or 3 occasions now. And I'm not saying that we don't give good information and that we don't have great questions. I'm just saying that I'm not an expert, and I don't know how expert the whole group is, and Fred's expert, but I'm just trying to say that the way we write the memo, and I think the memo is really great, the conditions are great, but maybe the way it's written, that the board unanimously approves the application versus recommends we follow Fred's comment letter, that is used as stopping the special permit granting authority to actually have any sort of say.
Okay, a couple of clarifications I would like to ask for. One is, what is the phrasing of the communication that goes from this committee to the permit granting authorities? Do we claim to have approved the application, or do we claim to have recommend approval with conditions for the consideration of the special permit granting authority? Fred, can you speak to that?
It's the latter. The letters, as the author of the letters, I'm very careful not to recommend approval, but not to say we approve, you approve, but to indicate that you recommend approval with conditions. I don't know how to make it any more clear. If you want to talk about specific applications and when someone said the groundwater committee already approved it, we can do that. But I need to know which projects we're talking about so that I can get out the decisions and we can have an appropriate conversation about how that might have transpired. My guess is that applicants go to the SPGA with the understanding that the groundwater committee's recommended approval with respect to groundwater. There may be other issues that come about on a site plan that don't pertain to groundwater, and they're appropriate for discussion. And some attorneys and engineers may get frustrated if they're asked questions about something that they've already responded to and gotten an affirmative recommendation from the groundwater committee. So if you want to talk about specific ones, I need to know which ones we're talking about. But the letters, to the best of my knowledge, the letters I've written have always indicated that you recommend approval in accordance with that section of the zoning bylaw only, the groundwater section, which is one of the reasons I like the criteria that we have just the way it is. You're recommending approval in respect to the groundwater portion of the zoning bylaw, and then the conditions that we see appropriate to mitigate any potential risks are outlined. On a separate note, the idea that you sometimes make a recommendation provided I get additional information, that's only to expedite the process, but in no way am I suggesting that you have to do that, and it's always a vote of the board to decide to do that or not. That is made before that's done. I don't go and get stuff after you've already deliberated unless you've approved that. So I need that to be clear. I don't deal with the applicants on your behalf outside of your meetings, beyond your hearing or your meeting.
Thank you, Fred. Teresa?
Thanks. Thank you, Jason. So Fred, along that lines, when you're waiting for supplemental information, I assume that the letter states that you would recommend approval provided that the town engineer receives A, B, and C, or is it that you're sending the letter only after you've received A, B, and C?
Well, generally what I'll do is, most of the letter is written based upon what I give you for recommendations. In my files, I call them recommendations or review memos, and then I call them decisions because they're your decision. So I cut and paste right out of that into the other one. And then if there's items that need to be reviewed after you've met and asked me to review them prior to going to whether it's the planning board or the ZBA, either way, we generally at the meeting, if you recall, give the applicant a deadline as to when that information needs to come so that the letter can then go and be as clean as possible.
Yep.
In the event that they don't supply the information, the letter goes indicating that it's still outstanding, and the ZBA shouldn't, or the planning board shouldn't, close a hearing if there's outstanding drainage calculations or something else. And that's not, I don't promote that. Yours being advisory, we have a little bit more leeway in how we write the letter and the information that we get. You have the ability to suggest conditions and then make the applicant aware that they need to resolve stuff before they get to the ZBA. And if the ZBA wants to approve something contingent upon something else, as long as it's not, critical to something in the bylaw that's not being met, that's up to them, or the planning board. That's up to them.
Okay.
That answer it? No?
It does, thanks. And Mr. Chair, I would also just add that it's incumbent upon the SPGA to make sure that the applicant before them is clear on the roles of the various boards and committees, including the fact that an advisory committee is really just that, an advisory committee that would make a recommendation. And that, again, we are not experts. The SPGA gets the final decision. And I think it would be very unfortunate if an SPGA ever felt as though the advisory committee had somehow wrestled control away from them over any issue, because the ultimate authority does lie with the SPGA, and that chair's ability to have those applicants understand those various roles. So if in fact there has been applicants who have put their foot down and said, no, groundwater is it, they're the experts. I think that if we can help out in some way to make sure that doesn't happen,
Yes.
that would be good. But it sounds like the way the recommendations are going over, and in my memory from serving on the planning board when we had those recommendations from groundwater, I don't know that issue is stemming from the letters that we're sending.
Right.
Can I add
Thank
one
you.
thing, Mr. Chairman?
Yes, Brian, please.
It's been my experience over 20 years or whatever it has been, that those issues that Fred identified as being not fully satisfied, but could be submitted to him, and the board has trusted Fred's judgment, have been very minor. I mean, they haven't been deal breakers. If they've been deal breakers, we've said, no, you've got to come back to us with the information we requested. They've been points of clarification almost exclusively. So I think that aspect of it isn't a real issue. Fred deals with these people all the time, and there's a level of trust between the consultants that come in on a regular basis. And I think the board recognizes that and can delegate some of that to Fred just to expedite the process if it's just dotting an I or crossing a T. And that's generally what I've seen it to be. So it's not like we're acquiescing everything and giving it to Fred and say, do what you want. It's very minor issues. It's just, little housekeeping type of issues.
Right. Thank you, Brian. Diane, do you have any comment? Just want to check in with you since I can't see you.
Thank you. Yeah, just one thing. I'm not quite sure I heard Amy correctly, so forgive me if I misinterpreted your speech. But it seems to me that other boards or maybe the SPGA is interpreting this as they can't go against us. I would think in a government, speech is the one important thing that everybody has and uses and should use, especially if there are questions and things that need to be clarified.
Thank you, Diane.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a couple avenues, I guess, that I'm seeing here. One is our communication to the applicant when they are before us to emphasize that we are an advisory committee. We are making a recommendation to the permit granting authority, and they should not take that recommendation to be a final determination of approval in the process. Just to be clear that they understand what our role is and what they should expect from the in terms of the weight of the recommendation that's coming from this committee. The second thing, and we probably need to discuss this a bit, and I think probably I'm going to ask Fred and probably Bryant and Diane to chime in. There's some differences of perception about what the scope of the committee's consideration should be with respect to the bylaw when reviewing an application. Should that scope and that consideration apply the entirety of the bylaw to the application in front of us? Or do we think that scope is predominantly confined to the technical aspects of groundwater threats and protection, irrespective of other aspects of the bylaw, such as whether a particular use is allowed or prohibited or something to that effect, which might be a determination to be made or an exception to be issued by the permit granting authority. So I'd first go to Fred to speak to the history of the operation of this committee in that regard. And then I'd like to hear from Bryant and Diane about their experience, since they are, is my understanding, the longest serving members on the committee. So Fred, would you start?
Yes. Thanks, Brian. Jason, I guess. Okay, so I've been here since 1998. When I arrived here, my predecessor was the town engineer at the time the bylaw was adopted. And his assistant was the assistant DPW director at the time. And we worked closely together on groundwater reviews. I spoke to the previous town engineer to make sure I was understanding it, because it is slightly different than the town I came from. So my understanding, as I was told, that the board looks at the worst case scenario of the use that's proposed in accordance with the zoning, the groundwater portion of the zoning. So that's what I've always taken as the approach that we need to do, is to make it, if there's a reasonable risk that can be mitigated, we try to find solutions and have the applicant provide the solutions, modify them, and agree to them before they go on to the SPGA, which was usually the ZBA. But recently, there's been some changes, and some special permits now go, more special permits now go to the planning board. So I feel as though that we've been doing it consistently since I got here. I believe it's consistent with the way it was done before that. And the process, I understand it, is to evaluate the worst case scenario, to make sure there's storage, to quantify the amount of chemicals and their hazard to the drinking water supply, and then to quantify the amounts so that we can make sure there's containment. We haven't had a lot of applications in the last couple of years that had a lot of chemicals. We have a lot of different mitigation techniques at our disposal or requests that we haven't had to use. We used to require epoxy coating on any flooring that would be a laboratory that might have spills that could wash out through doorways and out into drainage systems. We've had storage buildings where we've had to ask the floor to be dropped so that the volume of material that they store along with the sprinkler water can be stored within that depressed floor area without overtopping the jams and going out into the parking lot and getting into the drainage system. We've required valves to be shut off in the parking lot if a spill were to happen at the gas station over at Cumberland Farm. So there are a lot of different things, and we've tried to take the worst case scenario. We get a lot of grief internally here in the building, the staff does, from the applicants saying that we're looking for overkill. We're asking them to over design stuff that's not reasonable. So there's a balance. But in the end, it's the drinking water supply, and we take the worst case scenario that we're trying to prevent from happening and causing a problem. And I believe that's been consistently the message. And then the other thing is that it's always a recommendation to the SPGA who makes the ultimate decision. So that hopefully covers that.
Thank you, Fred. If you'll wait just a minute, Amy, I indicated I wanted to hear from Bryant and Diane just to provide some background over about the long-term operation of this committee and what they regard as being the scope of what the committee typically evaluates. Bryant?
Okay, thank you. I think Fred summarized it quite nicely. And when I started, it was protection of the groundwater. We had the groundwater protection overlay districts and the requirements that apply to each area, and we've never been concerned with lighting, plantings, or even use. If it's, that wasn't our decision. That wasn't under our purview as I understood it. If it wasn't a use allowed, then that was up to the ZBA to inform the applicant that, you have issues with what you're proposing is in terms of use. If you were going to go forward, you had to go to the Groundwater Advisory Committee if you were in any of the areas, and the criteria was set out, and generally we'd look at that and offer our comments based on conservation and Board of Health, Title V, water or sewer availability, that type of thing, so that everybody was on the same wavelength, hopefully, and that any issues that we raised were addressed by the applicant before they went to the final meeting of the ZBA. So I guess in short, it was focusing on potential impacts to the groundwater and the environment.
Thank you, Brian. Diane, could you comment on your, experience and expectation with respect to what Groundwater Advisory considers to be within the scope of their review?
It's interesting because this started back, IEP introduced the groundwater sections to town back in the 1980s, I think it was. And it's kind of grown since then in the sense of being far more specific. I didn't get on this committee until about 10 years ago, so I'm kind of coming in brand new, and it takes a while to get a hold of everything. But conservation primarily is trying to keep the water, the surface waters clean. And it goes on from there down into the groundwater and the other boards that would cover this. I think we do a good job. It's just really hard for some people to grasp the wholeness of it. Although with these brand new, not exactly brand new, though, stormwater management and land disturbance rules ought to clarify an awful lot of questions for people. And maybe it will be much more clear if they come to groundwater what it is they need to do.
Thank you, Diane.
Mhm.
As a relatively recent arrival on this board, which was, I guess, roughly June of 2019, due to a transition on the Board of Selectmen, where the prior representative passed the baton to me. I can certainly, speak to the perception that I'm taking my cue basically from the staff and experienced members on this committee as to what is the scope of what is typically reviewed by the committee and what aspects factor into their recommendations. We did have back in March of 2020, a particular applicant before us where there was some uncertainty about the use of the property. And it may be the case or may have been the case that, there was some question. I believe the applicant was and their attorney were indicating they were going to apply for a variance through ZBA to clarify that or to get a determination on that. But from my perspective, that was a circumstance where, irrespective of the use, the circumstances relating to groundwater were well in hand. There was very little, concern based on what the operation of that was going to be and what threats or mitigations were needed for whatever aspects to groundwater. So to me, that's a kind of a representative example where this committee would focus on the technical aspects of groundwater and would defer to the permit granting authority for any broader issues, and in particular, probably issues concerning whether the use is allowed or not for the district zoning. So I think I don't want to be, I don't think it's the case that you want the Groundwater Advisory Committee to be fully duplicating the effort of a special permit granting authority who does have the responsibility for exactly the same bylaw provisions. I think the expertise of this committee or the focus of this committee is more expected to be and serves the purpose better to focus on technical groundwater aspects, threats, mitigations, measures, and to the extent that those are handled satisfactorily, we can make our recommendation to the special permit granting authority just to factor into their broader evaluation of all aspects of the bylaw and make a decision as opposed to what we provide, a recommendation relating to the applicant's proposal. So that would be my perspective. Teresa, do you have anything? All set?
No, thank you, Jason. I think you summed it up accurately. I would agree with that.
Okay, thank you. Amy?
Yeah, no, I think it's great. I think everybody in Fred does a great job. And I do think most of the questions that I have actually coming in, I read in advance and I review, and then I get Fred's memo and I say, oh, he already covered all of it. So I do think, Fred is, he has the experience and he's great. And we're lucky to have him as an engineer in our town. One thing I was going to bring up, though, was what you talked about is use. And maybe it does have to be clear to some of the boards, because even I was on the planning board before I became part of groundwater. And you don't really know exactly what the groundwater committee is doing. And with the ZBA, I know a couple of times there was use talked about, and they said, well, the groundwater committee unanimously approved it. But I tried to say that it's up to the zoning board or the planning board to decide the use, not the groundwater committee. And I know you understand that, but I felt like there was a disconnect there with the zoning board, and I'm not trying to blame the zoning board, and it was probably just that one application. But the zoning board said we can't question it because the groundwater committee unanimously approved it and they felt it's fine. But on top of that, I think there are great conditions and safeguards put in place for a lot of these applications, but they're on the conditions of these operation and management plans, operations and maintenance plans, which ask for yearly reports. And I know this has been like asked before, but I really think there needs to be a process where we actually make sure that these applicants are submitting these reports annually, because such a great plan is put into place and the applicants say, thank you very much, and they go off. And then these annual reports for some companies or most companies are never submitted or checked, and there was just an environmental impact study done, and all these little spots came up and said, oh, there was a spill there and there's a contamination there. And I even said to the expert, but I didn't really get an answer. I said, how can, as a groundwater committee, what can we do to make sure, to the best of our ability, that these spills aren't occurring? And the only reason they found, I think, this last spill, correct me if I'm wrong, Fred, is because this one applicant had to do an impact study, and they found a neighboring, who was in Marlboro, so it wasn't Northborough's fault, found a neighboring company that had been spilling and contaminating the water or the groundwater. So I guess my suggestion or idea going forward with the groundwater committee, is there a way to have a database, and I could go look to see if there's a software, a database to track as soon as this application goes in, once a year, all of the companies have to submit their reports. Because I do feel like we work so hard as a committee, and Fred works so hard to write up these and review these great operation and maintenance plans, but companies come back 10, 20, 30 years later to do an addition, and we say, where are the reports? Oh, we never passed those in. So as a committee member, I feel like we're working really hard and trying our best. But if the applicant says, thank you very much, and walks away and never follows through on it, then how is it protecting our groundwater?
Okay, thank you, Amy. So let me separate this into two different things. The one thing I would like to arrive at, and we're winding down our available time here, is clear communication from this committee to the applicant about what we actually provide and what weight that has with the special permit granting authorities that they will be going before. And the second thing is, in our recommendations, to include, it might be a boilerplate statement or something, but generally something to the effect that the focus of this committee is on the technical aspects of groundwater protection, and does not necessarily include a full evaluation with respect to the bylaw in other aspects such as use, et cetera, et cetera. I think we want to communicate clearly to the applicant. We want to communicate clearly to the special permit granting authority, so that when those two are facing each other, the applicant understands that the weight of our recommendation is not authoritative. It's for the consideration of the permit granting authority. And the permit granting authority doesn't have a misimpression that the scope of our evaluation was broader than it was, and that our recommendation encompasses certain aspects of the bylaw that it in fact does not. So, I don't think we're going to have time to, formulate something or draft language for our recommendations or anything like that. But just I would like to ask those two aspects, at least communication to the applicant and our communication to the permit granting authorities. We want to be a bit clearer about the weight of our recommendation and the scope of our recommendation. Does that sound agreeable to everyone?
Absolutely.
Yes.
Yep, I think it sounds great.
Yep.
Okay. So let's consider that something that is, in a sense, fully within our control. Okay. Secondarily, Amy, you talked about what's essentially enforcement of the conditions that accompany a decision or approval, in part based on our recommendation. And the fact is that we don't necessarily have the resources in terms of staff and funding to provide that level of scrutiny across all of the operations in town that have had those approvals, and to follow up on all of that. So I think that's a separate consideration or conversation. And as we say, we probably don't have time to engage in it now, but it's a conversation that would have to bring in arguably the Board of Selectmen and town administration to weigh the benefits and costs of adding staff or resources or funding for that purpose compared to other demands that the town is under for other services. So I understand the deficiency there, the vulnerability. I don't know that it's certainly not. It's not something that this committee has the authority to direct. It is something that this committee can bring to the attention of town departments and other boards that might have authority to put the resources in place to improve the accountability in that sense. Yes, Amy.
Just one quick, I attended a class where they had a big discussion on this because it's not just Northborough. It happens to a lot of towns where they don't turn in their operations and maintenance reports. But in the class I was at, they said you could attach a bond to these maintenance and reports, and say you charge them $5,000 and we'll give you back $100 every year that you return in those reports. It actually gives them incentives to turn in those reports. And I haven't looked into it fully, but she said that's what some towns do.
That is the kind of solution that is relatively lightweight and puts the burden on the applicant to satisfy.
Yep. Yep. And I wouldn't know how, we'd have to look into how to do it, but I just wanted to throw that out there.
Okay. Yes. Again, something we can flesh out as a proposal in some sense and kind of pass it through the proper channels to see about having that kind of practice put into practice. So I don't think I have anything further myself on this topic, except to say that, yes, I do have my bylaw booklet. I received it from Fred when I first joined the committee, and it was Fred's own copy. He's got his marginal notes here in this copy. So I would respectfully ask that as long as planning board meetings are in duration, and as tired as people may be, that what you say and how you say it can lead to the wrong impression. And I would just ask for greater care, particularly when speaking about other committees or other individuals on those committees when they are not present to provide an alternate perspective.
Sure.
Thank you very much. If there's nothing further, Fred, yes?
I just have two things. I had given you a set of minutes from October. If
Sorry.
you
Yes.
want to defer that till the next meeting, I'm happy to do that. I do need to let you know that I did receive an application today, so we will need to meet in March. I am trying to confirm the time because the Board of Health has a conflict and we're trying to work it out so that we can both meet on the same night because your board is a little difficult to schedule. So Kristen from the Board of Health is on vacation this week, so I expect to wrap that up with her. So, but March 9th is the date that I have in mind. I'm going to work around her schedule. I think that they like to meet earlier, so we may push hours a little bit later than 6 o'clock, maybe 7 o'clock or even 7:30, depending on how much is going on with their board, so that Teresa can attend both. I know how she loves those meetings.
I do.
The other thing I wanted to point out before we go, we only have a few more minutes, is that The zoning articles that the planning board's proposing, there was another one. It's more of a clarification on the process. There's two, actually. One is something that staff pointed out, that the bylaw says that the board will send a recommendation to the SPGA so many days after the public hearing. That's illegal. We have to do it before the public hearing closes. So we're just going to
Makes
insert
sense.
the word prior to the public hearing closing. The other one is the duplexes that fall in a groundwater area require currently applications to the zoning board and the planning board. And so there's clarification in the bylaw to send those duplex special permit criteria recommendations to the planning board only. So just want to make you aware of that. That was in the package that that you got, and we didn't really get to talk about it with Carrie.
Okay, thank you very much, Fred.
That's fine.
I just want to see if we can knock off some business for a moment, Amy. With respect to review and approval of minutes of October 15th, time is winding down, but if there are there any amendments to that anyone would need to propose, or are we prepared to take a vote to approve those minutes? I'm not hearing any. Do I have a motion to approve the Groundwater Advisory Committee minutes of October 15th, 2020?
So moved.
So moved.
Okay, I caught Teresa Capobianco
Second.
first for moving. I got Amy Presky on a second. If there's no other discussion, roll call vote. Diane Goldner,
Yes.
Brian Furman,
Aye.
Teresa Capobianco,
Aye.
Amy Pretsky,
Aye.
Jason Pro votes aye. Minutes carry unanimously.
Thank you.
And Fred, as you mentioned, you're working out a date for the next meeting.
Yep, the date's pretty secure, March 9th. It's the time of
is,
the
okay.
meeting, the start time of the meeting. So if anybody has a conflict with a different time than 6 o'clock, let me know. But I believe the last conversation I had with Kristen is if they need to meet, they could meet possibly at 5:30 and they would be done maybe by 6:30, possibly 7. So, but with the pandemic, their discussions could last longer. And so I will wait till I hear from her to get a confirmed time. And if Teresa finds out anything ahead of time, if you could let me know, I'd appreciate it.
I
But
will.
March 9th would be the night.
All right, very good. I'm sorry, Amy, did you have something?
Yeah,
Yes.
I'll be quick. Just to wrap up the bylaw that Fred brought up, it had to do with the duplexes going to the planning board. I just wanted to let you know that we did meet with the ZBA and they were in agreement with it.
Oh, very good. Okay.
Because it was going to 2 boards, like he said, so we had to narrow it down to 1 board, but we did meet with them on it and they were okay with it.
Okay, very good. Thank you. If there's nothing further, we can give our host, Jim DiGiulio, back 5 minutes of his life. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
Motion by Teresa Capobianco, second by Diane Goldner. This is a roll call vote. Diane,
Yes.
Bryant,
Aye.
Teresa,
Aye.
Amy,
Aye.
and I, Jason Pro, vote aye.